Good and bad, there was a lot of interesting things to take away from this Arizona performance against the University of New Mexico.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. The show is brought to you today by Ultimate College Football HC. Check it out. All kinds of really good stuff. Download from the App Store or visit ultimate-cfb.com. 100% free boost. Use code LOCKEDONCollege in-game stores. Okay. Now, we got a lot to get to on this show. We are going to obviously talk all Arizona football and everything that transpired in that game, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we knew, some of the things that we suspected, and I think some of the things that are probably still a little bit, we're unsure of. How about that? And the first thing that I think we need to talk about is this Arizona offense, and this offense is absolutely exquisite. Noah Fifita will start there. There's no way that Noah is going to have a drop-off year. Now, we've talked about it a million times with Arizona football that you always worry about, what's the next shoe to drop, because there always is a next shoe to drop. There's always something bad that it does seem happens, but that's not the case here with Noah Fifita. This is a young man who is going to be an absolute stud as long as he's at the University of Arizona. He gets it from a throwing perspective, physicality perspective, everything about Noah Fifita you can watch for 5 minutes and be like, all right, that dude gets it. He's kind of a recession-proof quarterback, and he's always going to make the right play. If a player's open, he's going to get him the ball. Now, I think with T-Mac, Noah, it was interesting. Noah was talking about T-Mac, and he's like, I probably focused in on him a little bit too much. That is Noah being humble, because I do not agree with that. Listen, if the best college football player in the country is going to be single covered by the University of New Mexico, you should go to him every single time and make absolutely no apologies about it. Arizona would be doing them a favor by not going to him every time, and I got to give Brent Brennan and Dino Babers a lot of credit, because some coaches would try to outthink themselves a little and try to say, well, maybe we should do this or maybe we should do that, whatever the case may be, to try to mix things up. No. If you've got a player like Teteroa McMillan that is an absolute matchup nightmare for anybody at 6'5", he can essentially do whatever he needs to out there. You've got to continue to get him the ball, and it is coaching malpractice if you do not get him the football. So again, I do not agree with that. Now, but Noah's going to have a monster season. From a statistical perspective, I expect Noah to complete something like 70% of his passes. I think he's probably going to go for around 40 touchdowns, and I don't know what, 7-8 picks. There's not going to be a lot of picks because, as we know from Noah Fifita, he does not make many mistakes. So this was all kind of just a coronation that you pretty much had an idea of what you could expect from Noah. You just wanted to be able to see it, and he certainly, I think, has proved a lot of people right in all of that. And listen, he is after T-Mac leaves next year, there's going to be obviously some questions about what Noah Fifita can do. I don't really worry about any of those, because as long as Noah Fifita is the quarterback, he's going to be able to get the right people the ball, and that's just pretty much that. Now, the passing game is obviously going to be stationed around Teteroa McMillan, and that is the way that it should be. Again, I am not going to apologize for going to T-Mac every single time if he is being single covered. That makes no sense to me not to go to T-Mac if he's being single covered. Arizona would be very silly not to. And what I think was also very impressive about T-Mac is you saw the yards after catch. He was, he talked about, and I think what's impressive too is that when you're dealing with the foot injury that he had, that, he was able to still make plays. He was still able to get the football and then make people miss after that. That's kind of always been the next thing for him. Can he make people miss? And if he can do that, then, he's really the total package. But just a special, special football player. You don't see dudes like that come around here very often. And honestly, probably the biggest physical freak since Rob Gronkowski was on campus. Again, you just don't really see. And T-Mac is going to, if there's no team in the country, I don't care if it's Alabama, I don't care if it's Georgia, I don't care who it is, there is no team in the country that can cover T-Mac one-on-one. It's just not going to happen. He's too big, he's too strong, and his ball skills are just insane. And we didn't even necessarily see that, but you're going to see some of the catches that he's going to make this year where he goes up and he one-hands it, and everyone's looking around like, what the heck just happened there? He's a specimen of a different order. Like I said, you just don't see dudes like that at the U of A. And like I said, Noah Fafita was talking about how he needs to get the ball to other wide receivers. Yes, there is going to come a time and a place where he does need to get the ball to other wide receivers, but that is not that game. And if T-Mac single covered against any team, you should continue to get him the ball. I do not worry about, a lot of people are like, well, Jeremiah Patterson, he only had one catch for 9 yards, Malachi Riley, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really worry about that. Those guys are going to be just fine. They are going to be able to get the football because teams, sooner or later, they're going to have to double T-Mac. And when they double T-Mac, those guys are going to get their opportunities, and I think that they are going to excel in those endeavors. I really do. I think that he is this is a team. This is a group that I think knows what they have, and the wide receiver unit I think is going to be just fine. As a matter of fact, I have no concerns whatsoever. I think you have enough talent there with Malachi Riley, Jeremiah Patterson, heck, I mean even a Romello Murphy, and I guess we'll see at some point if Montana Lamonius Craig can be the player that I think a lot of coaches have been talking him up to be. We'll find out. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know that I see that one happening, but if he's open, Noah Fafita will be able to get him the football. And it's the same thing with the tight ends. Kean Burnett, one catch for had only one catch this game. He's going to have other games where he makes big plays. Kean Burnett is he's another one that I believe is an NFL player sooner than later. But sometimes you just can't go away from what's working. So all the things that we saw in camp, all of the players that were really stepping up, I think you're going to continue to see some of that. And but again, New Mexico made a very, very curious decision to decide that they were going to put single coverage on T-Mac, and they got burned for it. But the skill guys are all good enough. We're going to get to the running backs here in a second, but don't worry about the tight end spot at all. There's going to come a time and a place where the tight end, I think, is going to be utilized very, very heavily for the University of Arizona, and it's going to have to be because you're going to probably be dealing with a couple injuries here, and if you're dealing with a couple injuries, then you're going to have to be able to probably go with a few more 2 tight end sets, and if that's the case, or a tight end, and keep them in to be able to block. We'll find out exactly how this does play out, but Arizona has an embarrassment of riches, and I think you're going to find a game here sooner than later where somebody like a Jeremiah Patterson goes for 3 catches for 80 yards, or Malachi Riley can do the same thing, and I think you're going to find a game where Kean Burnett maybe gets 2 or 3 touchdowns or 4 catches for 70 yards, something like that. It's only a matter of time. That time is coming, and you are going to see that. Now, we're going to talk about the running game and the offensive line here in just a second, but first, again, Ultimate College Football GM. Check it out. Here's the deal. You go to Ultimate College Football HC, download from the app stores, or visit ultimate-cfb.com. Here, you can get a 100% free boost. Use code LOCKEDONCFB in the game store and get right in this as well. Again, another one of these ones where you're going to thank me later on it, because this is where it's at. And again, college football is in high gear. Good teams are playing. We're heading into week 2, and you're going to find even more games, and there's nothing better to be involved in than Ultimate College Football HC. So download from the app stores or visit ultimate-cfb.com. 100% free boost. Use code LOCKEDONCFB in the game store. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk about the running game. I think the running game is going to be dominant all season long. Now, a lot of people are like, well, the running game didn't really pick up until the second half. True. I don't care. The running game didn't need to pick up. The offense was not at all the problem in this game, and, anybody that watched it knows that. Listen, we're going to get to Ja'Cory Crosskey Merritt in a second because he's obviously the best, I think, prospect on the team. But Quali Conley, we got to give this young man some love. Talked about him a lot of late. Anytime you rush for the kind of numbers that he did at San Jose State, you're obviously a good football player. And he has shown time and time again throughout his career that he just kind of knows how to or he just kind of knows where to find the football, how to be able to get into the right spot, and make those runs. And I think you're going to see a guy that's going to probably get 7-8 yards per pop this season, and I think he's probably going to finish with 700-800 yards. A lot to like about him. And he does it the right way. Like I said, I think there's a lot of Michael Wiley in him. And, Michael Wiley, I think, is one of the more underrated players in recent U of A memory. And if you can get somebody like Michael Wiley, you take that every single day of the week. But he is like I said, he's just a very, very good football player. And you don't, again, he might not necessarily be the fastest guy out there. I get all that, but he is going to be the one that is going to set up his blocks. He's going to be able to, rely on things, and you're going to see just that. Then Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, stud. You're going to see a lot of 100-yard games from him, and I think you're going to see a lot of 100-yard games on something like 14 or 15 carries. He is a next-level talent. I don't know what round he's going to be picked in the NFL draft, but he's going to be on an NFL roster. Those two guys are far and away your lead backs, very much like Rayshon Speedy Luke, fam, but, obviously you had the fumble, and I just don't know quite where he fits into the grand scheme of things this year. I would love to see him redshirt, honestly, because I think next year with him and Risano, I think Arizona could be in some really good shape. But right now, it's going to be those two guys. It's going to be Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and it's going to be Quali Conley. And when you see when Noah Fafita talks about him, especially Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, he's just like, yeah, that dude's a little bit different. And I think you got your first peek of that, and I think you're going to see that throughout the season. This was an absolute great get by this U of A coaching staff, being able to find him, being able to get him, because, again, I think a lot of people were like, well, is he eligible? And Arizona did its due diligence on him, and again, he was committed to Ole Miss. Texas A&M very much wanted him, and Arizona was able to swoop in and get him. This was a big-time get. But both these running backs, both these dudes are absolute studs, and the offensive line I thought was fantastic. Listen, Rhino is probably going to be out for a couple weeks. But he graded out very, very well at left tackle. If he's out, I would imagine you're going to see Big Jonah move over to left tackle. And with Big Jonah, that's kind of where I thought he should have always been. But he's a game record. When Big Jonah is out there, that's a first round pick. I don't worry at all about that left tackle position. And honestly, when Rhino gets back in a couple weeks, I feel very good about that. I thought Rhino played very well, and everything that we saw in camp was very much indicative of what Arizona, what I think the Arizona coaching staff was hoping that they would see. The interior O-line, obviously, I got no problems with that one as well. Josh Baker, Wendell Moy, you got Leif in there as well. You've also got obviously a couple other dudes, but Ryan Stewart. These are all players that are good, and my only concern on this offensive line, and we talked about it quite a bit, is the depth on the outside, and we're going to find that out how this is going to play out, because Matthew Lotto is probably going to be that tackle as a freshman. Now, in camp, didn't look great, but he does have a lot of potential, and also he played pretty well in that game against New Mexico. Granted, it's New Mexico, I get it, but you got to kind of take the good with the bad when it comes with that, and so far so good, I think, with Matthew Lotto. I think if you're Arizona, you're really, really hoping that you can get Big Rhino back for the Kansas State game, but if you can't get him back for the Kansas State game, I think you really are hoping that he's going to be ready to rock and roll for Utah. Utah, I think, might be the most important game of the season for Arizona. But overall, there are some people complaining about the offensive line. I have absolutely no complaints about the offensive line. I thought the offensive line was more than good enough. And again, I think the big question was what kind of contributions could you get from Rhino, and I think Rhino showed that when he's going to be out there on the field, he's going to be good. And also, I think he gives you a lot to work with going forward. Big Jonah's obviously going to be off to the NFL after this year. But you're looking at this roster, I think that you're very much hoping that you could get back Wendell Moy, you could get back possibly Leif, you could also get back a Rhino. Rhino is going to be a center part of what Arizona football wants to do going forward, and again, I'm not really breaking any news there, but there's going to be a big opportunity for Matthew Lotto. If he can really kind of hold down the fort, I think you start feeling better about where Arizona is in the grand scheme of things, because, again, with Lotto, the coaching staff loves him. Jed Fish tried to get him to up there into Seattle, but he decided to stick around. So there's like I said, we'll see. And as we talked about before, I think with the tight ends, you're going to be able to help, because you're going to be able to keep them out on the edges at points, and you might see some 2 tight end sets. You're going to have to pick up a lot, though. Again, I think moving Big Jonah over to left tackle makes a world of sense. But you're also going to you have to have everybody else kind of pick up their pace a little bit, because I don't know that it's really fair to expect Matthew Lotto to just be an absolute animal from day one, even though I think that we would very much like him to be. Okay, now, coming up, we're going to talk about the defense, but first, 5-Hour Energy. Check it out, 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The great thing with Locked On too, but the great thing with 5-Hour Energy is that it works. Things like this, they don't stick around if they don't work. 5-Hour Energy works, and not only does it work, it's something that I think is really, again, people know about it. It's a proven commodity, especially in this day and age where everybody's trying to work. You got all kinds of different things going on. 5-Hour Energy is basically, you're like, all right, that is kind of my one-stop shop where, if it's going to be a long day at work and I need something to get me through the day, I go to 5-Hour Energy, use code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now, let's talk about the defense. Defense is interesting here, because with the defense, at first you're like, man, that was a terrible performance. And yes, it was. There's no way around it. A big part of it was that they couldn't contain the edge. And if you can't contain the edge, no matter who you're playing, especially if you're playing a fast quarterback or, fast skill position guys, that's going to be an issue. And Arizona couldn't do it, and they made Devin Dampier look absolutely fantastic. He looked like Tommy Frazier in that game. But those are things that I believe are correctable. Getting pushed around, those are things that is not necessarily correctable, but I don't necessarily worry about this. I do think that this is going to be a one-off. I think that with Duane Akina, I got a lot of faith in what Duane Akina does, and I think that this team is going to be much better than they showed. I still think, like I said, this is going to be a one-off for Arizona. And if it's a one-off for Arizona, then they're going to be in good shape. Like we talked about yesterday, I don't need this to be the 85 Bears. I just need this to be a good defense. I need it to be a solid defense, and the pieces are there. So a couple guys got to play better, obviously. Trey Smith got to play better. If Trey Smith, coming in, we talked about how he was going to be one of the linchpins of this defense, and because, you lost Taylor Upshaw, who had 5 sacks last year. You lost an Isaiah Ward. You lost a Deuce Davis. I mean, you essentially lost 15 sacks there. So you need somebody, and I think that the real hope is that Trey Smith can be one of those dudes that can get you those sacks, that can help, get that back. Because last year, Arizona's defensive line, was able to kind of push people around a little bit, because of how big they were. Now, again, Duane Akina doesn't believe in just holding gaps. He believes on shooting up. I get all of that. And so Arizona's going to have to get better play from its defensive line. I think you're going to see that as well, because I think a big part of it, the containment issues, I think that those are things that are correctable, and I think we're going to see that from this team. Jacob Manu, obviously he had a few contain issues, but you see him, he's just a game wrecker. He's one of the best linebackers in college football. You look at his stats at the end of the day, he's probably going to have It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's got 20-something plus tackles for loss. Just an absolute stud. Tay Brown, it was a tough game for Tay Brown, but it was also his first game. It was also his first game in playing college football, so I get it. But the linebackers, as we've talked about before, the linebackers are going to be a little bit of going to be a little bit hit and miss outside of Jacob Manu. And then you look at the defensive backs. It was Takario Davis. You can't get two personal fouls. You've got to be able to control yourself, and those were well-deserved personal fouls. You've got to be able to control yourself, period, point blank, end of story. That's what you got to be able to do. Marquise Groves-Killebrew had some moments. You're going to need more out of him. You saw Traden Stukes being physical as well. Gunnar Maldonado, going to need more out of him, obviously. He was out of there for quite a bit of the time. Genesis Smith, though, as you can tell, is a monster. I was surprised that Owen Goss wasn't out there more, especially with what we've seen. But, again, this is game one. I would caution not to to look past all of this stuff because, again, there's a lot to really like here. Now, when it comes to the coaching staff, I think is I very much like what Brent Brennan was able to do. And Brent Brennan was able to do a lot of really good things for the U of A and Dino Babers as well. I think with Dino Babers, hold on just a second. Apologize about that, but I think with Dino Babers, you look at his offense, and I don't have really any concerns about what he's going to do. He's a really good coach. He's always been a really good coach, and he knows what he's got at his disposal. Offensively, from a running back perspective, he is a dude who, again, he's had really good rushing attacks. I mean, heck, during his time at the U of A, with a trunk candidate, he was always able to kind of, push those guys out. And then, with the running game or the passing game, we've seen it before. He knows what he has in T-Mac. He's talked about that. He knows that he's got a next-level player, and you're going to see that. And Duane Akina, like I said, this was not a good performance for his defense, but I also think you're going to see a much more improved I think you're going to see a much improved defense in, and, like I said, I think Duane Akina is certainly the guy for the job. And with Duane Akina, he is, like I said, he's fiery, he's energetic, and he's somebody that knows what he's doing. Also got to give a huge shout out to Tyler Loop. Tyler Loop's one of the best kickers in the country. I think Tyler Loop's going to be able to play in the NFL. You think about all these years with Arizona that you didn't have good kickers, that you didn't have, that it was just difficult. Tyler Loop has been a very stabilizing force for the U of A, and that's going to be a lot of stuff to watch. Now, we're going to talk a lot about the running game next show because I think this is something that Arizona is going to be able to lean on quite a bit because with you got, like I said, you got the jack of all trades, two jack of all trades backs, and they're both very, very good. So with both those guys, I think we really need to hit on that and the offensive line. Then after that, we're going to talk more about the defense. We're also going to look ahead a little bit to NAU throughout the week. There's a lot. But like I said, game one, not that bad. In the second half, they clearly figured some things out, but you got to be better, obviously. And I expect this team to be better because the talent's there and the coaching is there. So we will talk about all of that and more. But as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A. We'll be back with you tomorrow.